With the Ha-Seong Kim injury news and the Mets making a flurry of moves, is the Atlanta Braves offseason now viewed differently? Do you now view this offseason as a bad one for the Atlanta Braves? We'll answer that questions and more on today's mailbag episode of Locked On Braves.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. Also part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network. I'm your host, Jake Mastroianni. I've been covering the Atlanta Braves in both the written and podcast form for over 10 years now, and this is a Locked On Braves, your daily connection to all things Atlanta Braves. And this is our weekly mailbag episode where I answer a wide variety of questions. We've got over 20 questions to answer on today's episode. A couple of them that we're going to focus on here early, though, have to do with whether or not AA needs to respond to the Mets' big flurry of moves this past week, and if what's transpired over the past week changes my thoughts and opinions on this offseason, which to many people, myself included, seemed like a very good offseason. So we'll answer those questions and a lot more on today's podcast. Before I get into the questions, though, a little bit of news update. You didn't see it on social media. I'm adding Gorov to the podcast this upcoming season to cover the minor league section of the Atlanta Braves force. So I'm really excited about that. If you missed the episodes that I did with Gorov earlier this offseason, go back and give them a listen, but he's the best out there, in my opinion, in covering Braves prospects. So I am very excited to have him joining me here on the podcast throughout the season to talk about everything happening down on the minor league level. Our listeners here are going to get great insight each and every week on what's happening down on the farm. So I am very excited about that partnership with Gorov and can't wait to get started with him. But let's jump into the questions here. And the first one I want to tackle is from SC Braves Talk, who says, the Ha-Seong Kim injury aside, do you feel that given the Mets' recent offseason moves, it makes the Braves' offseason grade out worse? Like if we gave the Braves, let's say a B+ before, does the Mets' huge moves now make the Braves' offseason a C+ with no more moves? And then Mike Brooks also said, could the Mets' recent moves force the Braves to blow past the last luxury tax level? I'm going to answer Mike's question because that's a quick one for me. Whatever the Mets do, it's not going to change the Braves' plan. Like if their plan was to stay under that third luxury tax threshold, they're not just going to blow past that because of what the Mets did. So no, I don't think, again, we're all assuming that's where the Braves' limit is. And if that is their limit, they're not going to blow past it just because of the Mets' recent moves. I think the bigger conversation, and I touched on this in an All Access episode I did earlier this morning. You're not a part of that and want to, you can go to lockedonbraves.supercast.com. But in that, I talked about the feeling that you're getting in Braves country right now. There's a lot of anger. And I think part of that is because within a week, you had one of your biggest offseason moves is gone for half of the year again. Last year, the only significant move you made for Jerickson Profar, he was gone for half the season. And now one of your biggest offseason moves this offseason is gone for nearly half the season. Look, there's nothing AA could do about either of those. He didn't know about the Profar suspension coming and, the steroid test. He could not have known that when he made that deal. If he did, he wouldn't have made it. He could not have known that Ha-Seong Kim was going to slip and break a finger. He could not have known that. At the time, those were good deals that we thought would help the team. And I stand by that. And again, for all of you out there who are saying he needs to upgrade shortstop, again, follow me on social media at shortstopball. I would love for them to get a shortstop, but outside of a dream scenario of trading for your favorite shortstop, which isn't likely to happen, Ha-Seong Kim was the best available shortstop this offseason, and AA went and got him. So I cannot fault him for making that move, but he just could not have known that that was going to happen. And I know SC Braves Talk says Ha-Seong Kim injury aside, but I can't put that aside because it does factor into the equation because all this is happening within a week span of Kim getting injured. So one of your biggest offseason acquisitions is now injured and out for half of the year. And at that same time, the Mets are gathering Bo Bichette, they're getting Freddy Peralta, and they're getting Luis Robert. And that's hard to take as a Braves fan, to see your rival making such significant moves while the moves that you made, the significant moves you made, they're already hurt. And so I get the anger and frustration. And I do think it changes the outlook on the offseason a little bit. And again, part of that is outside of AA's hands. He couldn't have known what was going to happen to Kim. Before all of this, and I still think with all of this, I had given the Braves a B+. I think, and again, I know we've had a lot of iterations of this over the offseason, but I would have said before all the Ha-Seong Kim injury news and before all the Mets moves that they made, which I don't think the Mets move should really affect what the Braves did, but I think there is a comparison to make, one that I've made on here before that I want to touch on. But I would have given the Braves offseason a B+. And I think I still give them the B+. And I said, in order for them to get that A, they needed to make the big splash move. And they didn't do that, at least to this point. And even at this point, if you sign Chris Bassitt, which we'll talk about, that's a big move, yes, but I still don't know that that's a ceiling moving type of acquisition for the Atlanta Braves. And I think this is where my frustration comes in as a Braves fan. And again, if you've been listening throughout the offseason, you know where I'm going here. I love the moves that the Braves have made, and that's why I would give the offseason a B+ for the moves that they've made. But I think the moves that AA has made this year, and for really the majority of his time here, have been floor-raising moves, and they have not been ceiling-raising moves. And I think why Braves fans are so angry right now is because they're seeing the Mets making ceiling-raising type of moves. Going and getting a frontline starter like Freddy Peralta, that raises your team's ceiling. Yes, it's filling a hole that they needed to fill, but it filled it in a way that raised their ceiling as a team. Going and getting a Bo Bichette, a hole they needed to fill. Remember, they lost Pete Alonso. They needed to have another big bat in their lineup. So yes, it fills a hole, but it also raises the ceiling of what that team can be. Going out and getting a Luis Robert. Yes, they needed to fill a hole in their outfield, but they do that with somebody that also raises their team's ceiling, because if Luis Robert is Luis Robert, that's an all-star level type of player, MVP type of player. Same thing for a Bo Bichette. Freddy Peralta's, could be a Cy Young type of contender. So I think where the Braves fans' frustration, and again, my own frustration comes in, is that the moves that the Braves have made are great. They built out a lot of depth to where you lose Ha-Seong Kim before the year even starts, and you've got a Mauricio Dubon who can fill in for him right now, and you can be okay with that. But you haven't made that move. I said coming into the offseason, go get me a Cody Bellinger, go trade for a Byron Buxton, go make that ceiling raising type of move, and they haven't done that. And that's frustrating because it feels like we never do that. And it is just hoping that the core of this team is who they can be. And I feel like I'm being negative right now. Maybe I am. Do not get me wrong. There's a question about this later. I still think this is a very good team. I think they can reach all their goals. I'm just speaking to the frustration that I'm seeing from Braves fans on social media right now, and the frustration that I feel too with this administration is that they're more so focused on filling out depth and filling out holes rather than elevating this team even more. And I just feel like that's been a constant, especially since 2021. But really the entire time, it's been about building a core, locking that core up, which was great, but we've never done anything to add to that, to elevate that. And I think that's where a lot of this anger and frustration comes from. So long-winded way to answer your question there, SC Braves Talk. This doesn't change my offseason grade for the Braves. I think they still did a fantastic job of filling all the holes that they needed to fill for this team, spreading out the depth to raise the floor of this team. And for that, I give the offseason a B+. But the reason I can't give it an A is because they still didn't make that ceiling-raising type of move. And that's the moves we just saw the Mets made. And moves the Mets had to make. And I talked about this on the All Access episode I did too. You compare these two teams on paper right now, the Mets and Braves, I would still take the Braves. And I know that's probably biased talking a little bit, but I still think the Braves match up very well. I think both teams have a very strong 4-5 at the top of their lineup, and then there are some questions at the bottom. I still think the Braves rotation if healthy, which is a big if, but that's also a big if for the Mets rotation with Manaea and Senga. It's still a big if for those guys. I still think I take the Braves rotation and the depth of their rotation. I'm definitely taking the Braves bullpen over the Mets bullpen right now. So again, those are moves that Mets had to make. They were a laughing stock of the offseason until they made those moves. So I wouldn't get too caught up in what the Mets have done. And for me, it doesn't change the offseason. The Kim injury does. I mean, that's nothing. There's nothing you could do about that. The move at the time was the right move. And there's just nothing you could do to prepare for him having an injury like that before the season even starts. So the offseason grade doesn't change for me. And I think the reason that many fans are frustrated is because they're seeing the Mets making ceiling raising type of moves while the Braves are just plugging holes and spreading and building out depth, which is good. It's great because of the Mets. You could see a million ways for the way that things don't go right for the Mets either. You got two guys who are playing positions they've never played before on the corners of your infield. You got Lubob, who can never really stay healthy out there. I mean, there are many ways that things just completely fall apart. And do they have the depth to cover that like the Braves, do right now? So great questions, good discussion. I understand the anger from a lot of Braves fans out there, and I think some of it is justified. But the ones who saying that the season's over, it's dead, AA needs to be fired, I don't buy into all of that. But I do understand some of the anger and frustration in seeing your rivals make those big splash type of moves while it feels like the Braves are just making those moves to plug holes, fill gaps, and spread out depth to raise your floor, but not your ceiling. So hopefully that answers all of that right there. That was just 2 of the 24 questions I have to get to on today's episode. We'll get into the rest of them here next. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax Full Service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish without the stress or guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work to get you every deduction. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver and gives real peace of mind knowing an expert is handling it. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in if a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year. Just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit turbotax.com/local to book your appointment today. That's turbotax.com/local to book your appointment today. Thank you for making Locked On Braves your first listen of the day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you have not already, go check out our Everydayer Club. We have 2 tiers over there. One that's going to get you ad-free audio. Both tiers will get you that, but our all access tier is also going to get you exclusive one-on-one text access with myself and Lindsay. You'll get all access episodes that me and Lindsay are a part of. You'll get an exclusive newsletter, a 15% discount to the Locked On merch store. So head to lockedonbraves.supercast.com to join the Everydayer program and unlock all access. You can find it in the show notes, find the link in the show notes as well. And appreciate all your support here on the channel, all of you who are already signed up for our Everydayer Club. Thank you so much for that. Jump back into the questions, though. They do have a lot to get to on today's episode. This one coming from Grayson, who says, don't know why AA hasn't addressed the obvious uncertainties in the lineup. The plan for the lineup seems to be hope, and it's already failing with Kim gone. Riley, Michael Harris, Profar, and Oz are unknowns. Now the Mets and Dodgers are actively bettering their teams while the Braves hope. So maybe I should have included this in the first segment. I think this is another fan that, justifiably so, is pretty frustrated seeing that the Braves are just kind of sticking with their core and hoping that these guys get back to the levels that they've been at before. For an Austin Riley, Michael Harris, and Ozzie, I think Profar, I feel pretty good about what you're going to get from Profar at this point. But Riley, Harris, and I think Ozzie in particular are 3 key members that the Braves are hoping that they can get back to form. And if they do, this team's going to be great. I really have no doubts about that. But I think it's just another fan who's frustrated at seeing the Dodgers and the Mets making these ceiling-raising types of moves, and the Braves aren't. Matt says, give me your way too early projections on this Braves 2026 team. Win the division, a wild card team, win a playoff series, win the NL, win the World Series. Obviously, the roster can change between now and then, but as currently constructed. So the only way you can do these early projections is to not really consider injuries, because we know that's going to be a part of it, and that can completely change things. So just on paper, projection wise, I would still predict this team to win the division. I think if I were predicting today, and I'll do an episode, once the offseason, we got, the rest of the top free agents gone, I'll do a deeper dive on, comparing the Braves against the Mets and Phillies and all of that. But I think right now I would still take the Braves. As I talked about in the first segment, I think if you line up the Braves and Mets rosters right now, I think the lineups are very similar. I think the rotations are somewhat similar and have the same question marks with injury risk and guys, wanting to bounce back. But I would still take the Braves. And I think the bullpen, I would still take the Braves. So, and then the Phillies, I think, I don't know what they've done this offseason, quite honestly, other than bring, JT back. And you don't know what you're going to get in Zach Wheeler. So I think the Phillies have kind of fallen back so far. Again, offseason's not over yet. They can still make some moves here, some impact moves. But for me, I think I'm still taking the Braves to win the division and make a run in the playoffs. Like, I do feel pretty good about the team this year. And at some point, knock on wood, or, things we got. I was watching a Braves Mets game from last year earlier this week, and it was a Friday night game against the Mets. And Tyrone Taylor swings at a ball. His feet come out from under him, and he gets a double on a ball that sneaks down the line. And it's just like, what do you do when things like that happen against you? It made no sense. He didn't have feet on the ground, and he got a double against the Braves. It's just, at some point, the luck's got to come back around for this team. But I do just feel like, take a look out of it, I feel like on paper, this team is good enough to still win a division and make a postseason run. PJ's Brave says, as you've mentioned, Austin Riley returning to form is a key to the 2026 season. What are you hoping his production will be, and what options are open for the team if he struggles for a third straight season, given his contract situation? Let me be very clear. Austin Riley, even if he just does what he did in 2025, is an above average player. So, like, there's nothing you have to do. And there's, let's say he has a 115 WRC plus again. That's still 15 points above league average, but it's nowhere near what you were hoping or expecting when you signed him to that big contract. So in terms of what I'm hoping for is in his production, I'm hoping for a WRC plus at least over 120. I'm hoping for him to get back to, hitting 260, 270, hitting 30 bombs, driving in 100 runs, being that middle of the order bat that the Braves signed him to be. So look, if he struggles to the point where he's a 110, 115 WRC plus bat, that's still better than the league average. And you're not really replacing that. It's not like you're inserting Nacho because Austin Riley only has a 100 WRC plus. Like, Nacho's, at least at this point, not giving you that type of production either. So I don't think I shouldn't say ever. I don't think it comes to a point where you're like, we can't play this guy, he's unplayable. It's just, can he get back to the point where he's a number 3-4 hitter for you? And that's what I'm hoping for with Austin Riley. Cavs Buckeye says, how big of a disadvantage, if any, is it that the Braves are directly accountable to shareholders in a way other MLB teams just aren't? Accountability should be a good thing. So, like, I would think that's somewhat of an advantage, that you're held accountable for your actions and the way that you perform. So I would see that as more of a positive than a negative. Dr. MJF says AA needs to add a starting pitcher. If they don't get Chris Bassitt, who do they go after? I think Lucas Giolito is the next best one out there that doesn't have a qualifying offer attached to them, assuming they're not in on Framber or Gallen. I think we talked about Giolito earlier this week. If not, I should have, but I know Lindsay talked about him. I listened to some of his mailbag episode he did on Friday. If you want to give that a listen, I know he talked about Giolito some, but I think he's the next best one that the Braves could go after. That would still be, again, it wouldn't be a ceiling raising move, but it would give you some solid depth in your rotation. ARITT says, you think AA should had a trade the prospects to get Gore? From what I understand, and I didn't know a lot about the prospects that were traded, it was a really good package. I know they gave up the kid from Tennessee, Gavin Keene, who was a first-round pick. So you're talking about giving up, Southasine, your first-round pick from last year. That feels like a lot for Mackenzie Gore. So again, I hate to say this because I talked about it with the Mets trade for Freddy Peralta. I don't think the Braves could have matched that trade to have an near MLB ready offensive player and an MLB ready pitcher in the top one that are both top 100 prospects and Sproat Jet Williams. The Braves couldn't match that in a deal. You're talking about maybe Cam Caminiti and Diego Torrens, but neither of those guys are close to ready. And I just don't think they could have matched either of these packages. And that's just that's just the fact of the matter. And it's also, who do teams really prioritize? Apparently that Washington Nationals front office really loved Gavin Veen and they wanted to go out and get him. So that was the guy they prioritized. Pogai says, do you think the Braves could trade the 26th overall pick to get something in return? So if they were to sign a qualifying offer player, they would lose their second round pick. So the prospect promotion incentive pick is not tradable. The only picks that are tradable are Comp A and Comp B round picks. So you can't actually trade, Braves can't actually trade that 26th overall pick. Calvin Fenner says, thoughts on this? And this is for the upcoming CBA. Says a salary floor of $120 million, no salary cap. Teams that exceed the third luxury tax have added penalty of no international bonus. Teams that exceed the final luxury tax, the Cohen tax, lose all draft picks. That'll never happen. Removal of penalty for teams signing qualifying offer free agent. I like the idea of the salary floor at 120. Dylan Short used to be the host here of Locked On Braves. I thought he put out a pretty good detailed proposal for what the new CBA should look like. I think he had the same salary floor of 120, but had a cap of $300 million. I think that's pretty fair. If they don't do a hard cap and they do some sort of soft cap, I think they do need to increase the penalties for going over to make it really disincentivize going over. I think the removal of the penalty for signing qualifying offer, that has to go away. Like, that's just a no-brainer. That's hurting team and players in that needs to go away. So that one I can definitely get on board with. Matt Olson Burner says, can you quickly rank your worry tier for the 1 through 9 in the lineup? So let me pull that up real quick. I'll just tell you, Acuna, I don't have any worries about other than just health. Matt Olson, I have no concerns about. Profar, I really don't have many concerns about. I mean, he came back last year, even after the suspension, and I thought he was the guy that the Braves signed. Baldwin, I don't have a ton of worry about, other than it just being a sophomore season, but he just looks so poised in his freshman year. I just don't, or rookie year. I don't have a ton of concern there. Riley, I would probably, so for all those guys, and I don't know if, ranking, tier or whatever, 5 being, I guess, very worried, 1 not worried. However, I'd probably put Acuna at like a 2, and that's just going to injuries. Olsen a 1, Profar a 2, Baldwin a 2, Riley, I'd probably put it like a 4. And again, as I said earlier, it's not necessarily a worry that he won't be a productive player, but he won't be the guy that we've seen in the past. He won't be an all-star MVP caliber type of player. Yastrzemski, I'd probably put it a 1. I think we know what he is. Ozzie, I'd put it like a 5. Michael Harris, I'd put it a 5. Dubon, I'd put it at a 1. I think we know who he is. So the guys that I'm most worried about, the ones I mentioned earlier, Riley, Ozzie, and Harris. Everybody else in the lineup, I feel pretty confident that I know what I'm going to get from those guys. All right, I got a lot more questions to get to on today's episode. We'll wrap things up here next. Jumping right back into the questions here, Calvin Fenner says, is it just me, or does the team still feel one hitter short? Everyone is talking about the rotation as they should, but feels like we need a bopper in left field DH. I don't disagree, but I think they already played that hand when they went and got Yastrzemski, that was going to be the bat of the offseason. That, along with, getting Kim for shortstop, that was going to be the upgrades. That's why I say, and I get it and I understand the worry from a lot of fans that they're just hoping that Riley and Ozzie and Harris are going to bounce back and have big years. Meanwhile, Olsen and Acuna and Profar being the guys that they were last year. And, if that happens, this is going to be one of the best offenses in baseball, but there is just a lot of hope. And I would feel better about that, as I said from the very beginning of this offseason, if they would have gone out and acquired a big bat to give you a little bit more certainty, as much as you can have certainty, than hope. Because right now I'm concerned about Riley and Ozzie and Harris. As I just pointed out, those guys, I'm not sure what I'm going to get from them. I'm hoping they're going to bounce back. I think they can. I think they're more than talented and capable enough to do so, but I just don't know. And had you gone out and gotten a Cody Bellinger, or traded for a Byron Buxton, or whatever the case may be, you would have gotten that big bat. I'd feel a lot more confident in what this offense is going to look like. Doc's card says start one, bench one, DFA one. Braves middle infielder duos. 1, Blauser and Lemke. 2, Simba and Ugla. 3, Dansby and Ozzie. So, Doc, you know which one I'm picking. You sent me the card here behind me. I'm going with Simba. Like, you give me a choice to pick Simba, I'm starting Simba. I don't care if he's attached to Dan Ugla. Ugla had at least, one pretty good year here in Atlanta. So I'm going Simba, and Ugla is the one I'm starting. I'm benching Dansby and Ozzie, and if I'm being quite honest, that's probably the best duo of this two. Maybe it's just because I was a lot younger when Blauser and Lemke played. I know Blauser had some pretty good years in there, some 5-war years. Lemke was never much of a hitter. But I'm probably DFAing those guys, and I'm probably starting Simba just because you give me a chance to watch Simba in his prime. I'm going to watch that every time, and then I'm going to bench Dansby and Ozzie, and I'm going to DFA Blauser and Lemke. So sorry to some of the older fans out there who loved watching Blauser and Lemke. Whit Price says, do you think we could revisit a Marte trade? What would be the most you would give up with Ozzie, Richie, Smith? Look, with what we've seen in the trades, at least for pitching, but and also considering the fact that the Diamondbacks shut down any Marte trades because they weren't getting anything close to what they thought was valuable, I don't know that there's anything the Braves could give them unless they're taking off the Major League roster. I don't really know what the Braves could give to entice the Diamondbacks to trade Ketel Marte. So no, I don't think that's going to be revisited. Alex Applefield says, what series are you most excited about in the first month of the season, and where do you see us record-wise after that month? So let's take a quick look over at the schedule. I can just tell you right off the rip, I'm excited about the first series of the year, and I know that's maybe kind of cheesy, but they're playing the Royals. I mean, and Bobby Witt's probably my favorite player in baseball right now outside of Acuna, because I think he's the best shortstop in baseball. So the first series of the year against the Royals, and you're at home this year. I'm hopefully going to be there on that Friday night. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, right out of the rip, the Royals, that's the one I'm most excited to see because it's opening day weekend. You're there at home, and you're facing Bobby Witt Jr., who's one of my favorite players in baseball right now. After that, they're playing the A's, and then the Diamondbacks, the Angels, the Guardians, the Marlins, and then the Phillies, Nats, Phillies again, and Tigers. I feel like that's a pretty decent. It's definitely a lot more manageable than what the Braves had last year, starting out on the road with 7 against the Padres and Dodgers. I would expect a record over 500. If they're not over 500, definitely by the middle of April when they go into that Phillies series, they got a stretch where they face the Phillies 6 times in a week and a half span. I would expect them to be over 500 at that point, and I would really expect them to be, over 500 or close to it by the end of the month. If they're not, I'd be a little bit worried at that point. Cass Buckeye says, I know it's a bit of a crapshoot, but what do you think we make of the failures in amateur international free agency? We got the money back, but have little to show for it. I don't mean big league contributors. I mean guys that became real prospects that you can project or trade. That's been a failure. There's no other way to put it. It's been a failure. They have made a lot of changes in that area over the last couple of years, and it feels like they're getting better with these last couple of international signing classes. I don't know what to attribute it to other than when they had all those sanctions, maybe they laxed back on their international scouting a little bit. And that's just an assumption. I can't confirm that. That's something like our guy Gorov, when he's on the podcast, that's something he could probably speak more to. But the only thing I can think is that during those sanctions, they really cut back on their international scouting department, and they really suffered for that when the sanctions were over. Again, that's just assumption. I don't know, but they have pretty much rehauled that staff over the last couple of years, and hopefully that's heading in a better direction. But that has been a big loss because, not only did they have the sanctions for so many years and they weren't able to make a lot of headway in the international market, even since those sanctions have been taken away now, they really haven't hit all that often on those guys. And like you said, not just having big league players come out of there, but having guys that you could trade or prospects to help, elevate your class. JDK says, Jake, Bassitt to the Braves is a foregone conclusion. Yes, it makes perfect sense to me. Like it really just does. I laid this out in the podcast the other week. I just feel like it makes too much sense for it not to happen, which means it's probably not going to. I think a lot would depend on the price because we've seen some of these pitching prices this offseason. If it were to get to over $20 million a year for a Chris Bassitt, then the Braves are really pushing up towards that third tier luxury tax already, which wouldn't give them a lot of wiggle room to make other moves during the season. So if he were to go to and maybe beyond that $20 million a year range, I could see him getting priced out of what the Braves are comfortable doing. But if you can get Chris Bassitt for 20 mil or under, I know MLB trade rumors, they projected him to, one writer at least projected him to go to the Braves, and they projected a salary of 2 years, $38 million. So $18 million a year. I would do that right now. If that was the deal, I think it would already be done, which leads me to believe that maybe he is getting offers for over 20 million. Sudsburn says, could the Braves have signed a Kyle Tucker-esque contract, low annual salary with a massive signing bonus each year? Could they have? Yes. But they didn't. So I don't really know how else to answer that. Yes, they could have, because the Dodgers did, but the Braves just chose not to. Hayden Harris says, why not Zach Gallen? Well, he's coming off a bad year, and he has a qualifying offer attached to him. So I think that's why. Another one from Sudsburn says, what is more likely, that AA shifts to the current market and signs a 3-year with opt-outs, or hands out long-term deferred money? I think neither are likely, because he doesn't do opt-outs and he hasn't done deferred money to this point. So I think neither are likely, but I think the opt-outs one is, I don't know. Again, I don't see either happening, but I think the opt-outs would probably be the more likely of the two. Caden Hurd says, if you could choose one player to revert back to 23 form, who are you picking and why? I mean, obviously, I'd love to see 23 Acuna again with that 11% strikeout rate. But to the point earlier in the podcast, guys that I'm worried about, even Riley's 2023, his 2024 was better, or his 2022 rather was better. So I'd rather have the 2022 version of Austin Riley. I think Ozzie. If you can give me 2023 version of Ozzie again and that power, and everybody else just kind of stays at where they are right now, I think that elevates the lineup a ton. Another one from Caden, who says, if the Braves were to sign Valdez and played the Dodgers in a 7-game playoff series, how are you setting up your pitching? I'm going Chris Sale. I'm probably going Framber in game 2. Framber a lefty. Let me apologize. I think he is a lefty, so I might split up the lefties in that case. If Framber's a lefty, which he is, then I might split it up and go Sale, Schwellenbach, Framber, and then maybe Strider, if it needed 4 starters in that. So yeah, that's probably how I would line it up there. Cass Buckeye says, hindsight's 2020, but is it worth noting that the Swanson contract actually ended up being a bargain at 25 million AAV? The dollar WAR calculation means you're expecting slightly better than a 3 WAR player, and he has been over 4 WAR per season with Chicago. This is a tough question to answer. And I really talked a lot about this earlier in the offseason. You want to go give those another listen. Because of the way the Braves have handled, or rather not handled, the shortstop position since then, yes, it seems like it would have been worth it to pay him that money. Do I think that was a huge overpay for Dansby Swanson? Yes. At the time, would I have done that deal? Absolutely not. And even today, in hindsight, I still don't know that I would have done that deal. Had I known the Braves wouldn't really address the shortstop position post Dansby, that's probably what leads me more to thinking that in hindsight, maybe you do that deal. But it was a massive overpay, even to your point, for how you value, WAR, towards a dollar amount that the contract's been worth it to this point. I still think that was a huge overpay that the Cubs made for Dansby Swanson. And you also have to consider, if the Braves have made that move, how much would that have limited them to do other things? And you maybe respond to that and say, they haven't done other things. So what are you talking about? I mean, maybe you don't blow $24 million in trying to acquire Jared Kelenic. You don't have to spend $20 million this offseason trying to get a Ha-Seong Kim. So yeah, in hindsight, because of the way they didn't handle the shortstop position afterwards, and they didn't have anybody else really lined up to take his place, and shortstop, they've been, I think, bottom 3 at the shortstop position since Dansby left. So yeah, in hindsight, it may have been worth it to do that deal. Last one here from Brian Snickers, who says, with the addition of Yastrzemski and a situation where Acuna primarily only DHs until the club options are up, do you foresee his value significantly decreasing to the point where the Braves would be able to afford him, or is it pretty much a given that he is too expensive? I don't know. I don't think I understood the first part about Acuna primarily DHing. Are you thinking that if Acuna does primarily DH, that's going to decrease his value to where he becomes more affordable. Juan Soto got $700 million, and he's going to be DHing soon. So no, I don't think, if Acuna is an MVP type of player again, I don't think that would really do anything to his value. And I also don't think he's going to primarily DH. I still think for several more years now, he's going to primarily play right field. But again, if he produces like he's capable at the plate, it's not really going to do anything to his value. Because like I said, Juan Soto is going to be a DH pretty soon. He should probably be a DH more right now than Acuna should be, and he's still got paid a ton of money. All right, that's all the questions for today. Thanks so much for submitting all of your questions to this week's mailbag episode. Thanks for those who were able to join me here live. Adam Ritter, Go Braves, UFO, Doug Abell in here as well. King of Games, Jamal Jones, BC, Video Moon. Thank you all for joining me on today's episode of Locked On Braves. Hope you all have a great weekend. Again, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, hit the thumbs up button, leave us a comment down below. If you've been thinking about joining our Everydayer club and you want the all access episodes, go to lockedonbraves.supercast.com to join that program. Really appreciate your support there. And again, as always, thanks for making Locked On Braves your first listen of the day. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast, and we'll talk to you next time.